But then he messaged me. He slid into the DMs, and you know what he said? You've got a good style.
It's so cliche.
Hey guys, and welcome back to episode number 4 of her podcast. And today I have my wonderful husband
Hi,
to join me,
guys.
Brandon. My husband of 8 months. We've been married for 8 months.
Wow, I wasn't even counting, but 8 months.
Yeah.
Long time. It's a long time.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, welcome to this podcast. Reason why I have Brandon on this podcast is because I really felt like on my heart to share about like our marriage, what it's like, what it was like for us dating as a Christian couple and being married young. So, and I've had lots of questions about it. So I was like, why not put out a podcast with my other half and we can share the journey.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting.
So we got, I put up a question box on Instagram, on my Instagram stories to see if anyone had any questions. And the first question was, how did we meet and how did that all go about? So I thought we'd just go straight into it. So Brandon, do you want to share a little bit about how you moved to the Gold Coast, how you found God, which will lead us into how we met?
Yeah, well, so long story short, I'm a BMX rider, and I think was it 2018? 2018, I got invited on a BMX trip where I was staying in Miami, and we were doing like an Australian Institute of Sport study. And like I was anti-God, like I was way gone. Like
Had you ever gone to a church before chapel?
No, like I think I went to a church like once, but I can't really remember. But I just remember like just my cousin inviting me to church, and like there's a long backstory behind that whole process, but somehow I ended up at church, and I remember just worshiping at the back, and literally my cry for the Lord was like, I've got a hole in my heart and I want that void filled. And literally within that moment, it was like Jesus himself came to me and touched me, and it was like this liquid lava, and this love just filled me and like put me in an overflow place.
And I remember the first service he walked in, and my mum was like, he keeps looking at you, that guy. And I was like, oh yeah, whatever, mum. And like, yeah, I knew he was a cousin of Craig's and stuff when he walked in. I was like, oh yeah, this guy, whatever. I didn't really take much notice of Brandon on that first service. He walked in and got saved.
Yeah.
And then tell us, continue on.
So like my lifestyle was far away from any kind of Christian walk you would ever imagine. I was like way left center, you know what I mean? I was gone.
Before you came to church?
Before I came to church. And then when I found God in that moment, it was like literally like inside me changed. It wasn't like my whole life changed, but it was just things started to continually drop off. And I remember like that first service, like I don't remember ever seeing you. Like I was just honestly so broken and so in tears, the whole thing, that whole service. But I remember, I think it was the Tuesday after that, one of my cousins, Craig, he was holding like a training session. I think he does like CrossFit in his garage. And I just turned up. I don't know why I turned up. I was literally didn't even have any like training like scheduled for the day, but I would just go there, stretch, do some recovery, hang out. And like I remember, do you remember that first time? She was there training, and I literally went on Instagram Live.
He was doing like an Instagram Live and was like going up to everyone like who's like sweating it out training and like filming us. I'm like, who does this guy think he is? Putting me on his Instagram story of us like sweating it out in the gym. He was just randomly sitting there watching all of us train. I was like, what the heck?
And like I was only really doing that because Kiri didn't like it, and I was like, oh, this would be so funny. So I was like up in everyone's face. I was like, work harder, push harder. I was just that one guy, you know, in the gym that's just like absolutely psycho, just go. And then I remember like videoing Georgia, and she was like, who the heck is this dude? But long story short, that night I end up, what happened was she ended up following me on Instagram.
But then he messaged me, he slid into the DMs, and you know what he said? You've got a good style.
so cliche, but anyway, long story short, the conversation kept going, and then I went back to Melbourne, I think a week after that. But I do remember before I left, I went to one more service at chapel, And then I remember Georgia was up the front speaking, and I was like, she was speaking about angels and stuff like that. I was like, oh, damn, I think I've seen one too, you know?
Oh, so really cute.
And then
Oh
pretty
my
much,
gosh.
pretty much like my life had drastically changed. Not that my lifestyle had necessarily changed, but I
Yeah.
remember going back to Melbourne and literally being so convinced that God had called me to the Gold Coast. And that was a process in itself
And
as
then
well.
he moved here. So long story short, he ended up moving here. And then I think it was the first Sunday night service that he'd moved here. He came to church. And Craig was like, oh, Brandon like wants to say hi to you kind of thing. And I was like, oh,
Yeah,
who does this guy think he is?
teed it up.
And so I was like, you know what? If he wants to talk to me, he can come to me. Girls, don't be the chasers, okay? Just let the guy pursue you. So I was like,
she chased.
I was
but
like, you know what? I'm not looking for a relationship right now. So I was like, if he wants to talk to me, he can come find me. So I walked outside and Craig pulled Brandon, like yanked him in front of me. And I was like, what the heck? And Brandon was just standing right there. And I was like, hi, what the heck? And then we kind of started chatting. Brandon, I have never seen you so nervous.
I
You were
was
so
so
nervous. Like,
shy.
I feel like I was like just because I was quite careless and I knew what his lifestyle was because
Yeah.
Kariana had specifically told
Pretty
me.
bad.
But I knew his lifestyle. Like he was seeing another girl at that time, for goodness sake. Like I knew he was a bit of that player reputation.
Yeah.
You know, I knew what he was like. So I was like, whatever. Like I didn't think anything of it. And then I was like, oh, do you want to go sit down and chat? Because there was heaps of people around. So we went and sat down and I just had a general chat. Like,
It was so weird though, because it was like, I thought I would be the one leading this conversation, but it was like, she was like, oh, it's so noisy here. Do you want to go have a chat at the table? And I was like, oh, hey.
well, growing up, we just got, me and, you know, my siblings just got taught to be kind of friendly to everyone being a pastor's kid. So I was just treating them like a normal person, to be honest.
Wow, I was, I was,
At the start.
I was talked to like, you know, like
Aw.
a king. You know?
Anyway.
No, but like as well, like at the same time, we were both not in a place of dating at all, or
We
even
both weren't looking for a relationship.
honestly, that was the last thing I was looking for. You know, before I even moved to Queensland, like I was just 100% sold for God, and I was like, you know, God's called me. I need to move. I need to pack up everything. And one of my convincing statements was to my family, because I had to move out the house. I was like, oh, I'm just moving to Brisbane. I'm gonna move to Queensland so I can train in Brisbane for the Olympics. And my dad literally said one rule. He's like, that one rule is no dating girls. Like, that's how bad it was.
Yeah.
And literally I was like, no, Dad, like, I don't even need a girl, because like my heart was so filled with God. And I was just in a place where I was just so like happy with the relationship that I just made with God. And I was like, that's all my focus was, you know? And without like, and even before I came to God, I had like literally my life like mapped out in front of me. I was like, you know, I'll just keep writing, I'll keep being good. And then
He wasn't going to get married till he was over the age of 30, which is great because heaps of people have different goals in life. But Brandon had his life mapped out before he met God.
Yeah,
and then it just changed.
I was literally like, I'm just going to play around and muck around until 30. And then 30, I might just start looking for a wife. And then after that, I might have kids, you know, like I was always going to have kids, but I was just like, let me just live my life till 30. And
Yeah.
God literally just flipped that upside down.
And anyway, fast forwarding because it's quite a long story. Long story short, my family kind of took Brandon under the wing. Is that kind of how you
Like,
say it? Like my
they kinda
family kind of
just-
brought him under the wing, and we kind of
Yeah.
became his family. And Brandon just started coming over for family dinners, and me and Brandon just like really clicked. Like we had a lot of interests. Like we both like being healthy and like working out lifestyle. We both liked filming and taking photos of each other. Like we had heaps in common, and we had God in common, and we just started hanging out. And then it came to the point of he asked my dad, oh, can I date your daughter? And
Oh, man.
so let's talk a little bit about like so I will just say Brandon dated a lot of girls casually, but he only had, other than me, one other really serious relationship for a few reasons. But like when we started dating, what was running through your head, or what's running through guys' heads when they're really looking for a wife or a long-term life partner?
Yeah, I think, you know, for a guy in itself, you know, we're brought into this world with the mindset of you can't be vulnerable, you can't really be honest with how you're feeling. But at the end of the day, you know, every girl thinks that a guy is actually searching for someone who's hot, who's sexy, who puts their body out there. And at the end of the day, that might be good in what guys are looking for. But when you're looking to settle down and you come to the realization that that's, you know, that's just almost like pretty much like a toy. It's not something that you're going to have forever. Like when you come to that conclusion and you actually honestly are looking for a genuine girl, one of the biggest things is you're looking for someone who's trustworthy, someone who's like super honest, someone you can be vulnerable with. Because as a guy, you know, you want to be super vulnerable with someone, and it has to be someone who's secure, someone who's safe. Like the myth out there is you just got to be sexy, you got to be beautiful, and that's all it is. But there's so much more. And when I met Georgia, honestly, God opened my eyes and like showed me her. And there was just one specific thing different to like this. I'm just being brutally honest. Like every single girl you could think about, like any nationality, pretty much I'd been through all of that. And I was just like, dang, like it's nothing at the end of the day, you know, until like honestly God opened my eyes and he pointed at her and literally showed me just this purity. And there was just like, I don't even know what it was. It was just such a clean heart. Literally, that's the word, like clean heart. And when I realized that, I was like, man, something is so different, and that's what it is. And once I put my finger on it, which took me like a month, because I kept going to God, something is different about her compared to every other girl, you know? Yeah. And once I got to that conclusion, I was like, damn, like this is actually the one. And then
And he knew pretty early on, whereas for me, it took a little bit of convincing. I don't know, it just took a bit of convincing because I knew I was just kind of at the start, I think it just had my suspicions. So I was just like being a little bit more guarded, whereas Brandon was like straight in, like, you know.
Yeah. And that was the thing as well. Like I was still quite loose in the process of that. Like I was rowdy, like, you know, I still recall one time just going out one last time partying, and I was like, you know, God, this is actually the last time. And I think it was actually that weekend that I actually asked Georgia out because I was just like, God, I'm done. It was like pretty much going to another island and burning that boat and going, I'm never going back. And that's how it was.
And then pretty much we started dating.
We need to rewind back to that first date.
2018. What was the first date?
Literally, we were at Betty's Burgers, and this is when we were just like low key going on a date.
This could be a really long story. No. This is before we were official.
Yeah, short story.
Pretty much, this is before we were official, like a week before or something. And Brandon was like, "Oh, you know, I'm really not looking for a relationship," and I was like, "Yeah, me neither." Like. Or something, we both were just like, nah, we're not in a place of a relationship. Yeah. And then, but low key, we were telling each other we liked each other and we maybe wanted one like in the future.
Yeah, it was so cute.
Yeah, it was so funny.
And then I just dropped the bomb on her. I was like, you know, Georgia, the next girl I date, I'll marry. And that was the place I was.
Damn.
That was literally the place I was in. I was ready to, you know, commit myself.
Yeah.
And that commitment, like there was so many options that were throwing at my face, and I was like, no. And then, that's when it all started.
And like, this leads me into another question. Someone asked, how did you really know they were the one? To be honest, at the start, I didn't. It took me a few months to be like, oh yeah, wow, like I think he's actually the one. For him, it might have been different, but for me, it took time. And I think like, I don't know, you just have this click moment when you kind of know they're the one.
Yeah, like I had that click moment like a month before I'd even asked her out, but there was outworking for me, like a lifestyle change for me, and it was big decisions after big decisions sacrificing, because I knew like literally if I was to date her, this was like setting something in stone forever.
Yeah.
But I definitely felt that click moment when God opened my eyes to see that purity and to see that heart.
So anyway, we started dating and we dated for a year and then got engaged, which was so awesome. And one of the other questions that got asked was, did we do like pre-marriage counselling, have people keeping us accountable? Yeah, we did. We had a few couples keeping us accountable while we were dating. Like, as a Christian couple, our morals was, you know, we didn't want to stay together before marriage, and we stuck to that. And the reason why we did is because we had people keeping us accountable. And I feel like the lines are so blurred when you're dating as a Christian couple of what's wrong and right. But the key is to just have people around you keeping you accountable, having those tough and nitty-gritty annoying conversations that can be kind of awkward. But if you are really serious about each other, you will wait till marriage, full stop. If you actually are, we did. We actually did, with not a shadow of a doubt.
And like, I do think the key to every relationship is having a lot of people around you, people that are honest, people that will speak in. But specifically, I see with the generation that I'm in and the age I'm like age bracket I'm within, you know, the biggest lack for us is not having like wise counsel. So for us, we had like, you know, people who had experienced marriage for so many years, speaking life, and you know, it's hard to receive that. And you know, for a generation our age, like if you want to make your relationship successful, you need to push your like pride aside, because
and we worked really hard to have a healthy relationship. Like we did, like, you know, we had a lot of tough conversations, but
and like I see so many relationships these days, and there's so many people, you know, that are low key dating or dating in the background. It's like, man, like you need older people speaking into your like marriage, because like why date? Like that's, you know, why date
with no goal?
Exactly. Like you know, like my advice would be, you know, just get straight into it. If you're committed, just commit straight off the bat.
If you're committed, just commit and don't be scared, you know. And there's always people always say, oh, what if there's someone else that might be a bit this or that or the other? You know what,
and you know, like I want to erase I literally want to erase one of the myths that a lot of people have when they come into a relationship, is like, if you go into a relationship thinking A is going to change to B, and they, like the partner, is going to change and be like this, that's a myth, man. You need to go in there and know exactly what you're in for, because nothing really changes. Like if I think about mine and George's relationship, it's not like there's no expectations for you to be such and such. You just love each other how they are and not expect them to change. You know what I mean? You don't want to, and that's why you want to date someone who's got the same morals as you. Me and Brandon were both Christian. We had solid morals. We knew what we wanted. We knew the end goal, and that's how we did it right. If you're with someone and your morals are different, it's going to be very hard. So that's what got us through the dating stage. Then we got engaged and we started planning our wedding. I think as well, like, you know, especially through that cycle of like dating and being engaged and not, you know, having sex, like that's a big thing, not having sex. So like I definitely saw the grace of God through that, like 110%, you know, like there's always going to be that temptation because it's the person you love.
Of course there is. And this is really real, a really real conversation, but you know, not many people are talking about it. So, you know. But this is like a really real conversation that you have to have with yourself. The temptation is real. God isn't the tempter, but it says that, you know, he allows this temptation, but he says that there's always an exit. So there's always a way out.
It's always looking for that exit. And one of our biggest advice was like, you know, if
we didn't hang out alone. Like
I wasn't going that way, but like pretty much like if you have a baby and you don't want him to drown in the pool, what do? Do you put a fence up? The threat's still there, or do you just take the pool away completely?
Yeah, and we just took the pool away completely, if that's what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so you've got to do that. And look, we could go way more in depth on that. But anyway, so yeah, we got through dating really well, but that's only because we had good people around us pulling us in line and like confronting us. So yeah, anyway, let's head into the engagement wedding process. So anyway, we got engaged New Year's Eve, and it was 2020, start of 2020. COVID hadn't hit yet, and we were just wedding planning. We were like, yep, we're going to get married October 23rd, 2020. We were planning for that, but then COVID hit, and we were so worried. His family was in lockdown in Melbourne, so they couldn't come up for the wedding in October. So we actually ended up having a really small wedding
Yeah.
with just pretty much my family and some of his family, October 2020. And then, so we've been married 8 months now, nearly a year. And then we had our second wedding with all of our church family and whatnot in February 2021. Now, I really think we should talk a little bit about on how marriage has been so far, because we're really freshly married. You know,
Yeah.
we're
Yeah,
pretty
we're
freshly
fresh.
married.
Yeah. And I think, like for me, like I've been in and out home for so long because I'd travel overseas and I'd kind of, be really independent since I was like pretty much, I remember traveling for like 2 months to Europe when I was, how old? I would have been 17. So like there was like, I was constantly on trips doing stuff myself, learning how to fend for myself. So there was, when I used to go home, I used to like things like a particular way.
He was quite fussy with a few things.
Oh, so many things.
So like heading into getting married and answering the question, yes, we did do pre-marriage counselling. We did a pre-marriage course.
Yeah, Symbis.
Symbis. So that goes and you like pretty much like break down every area of your life and you see how compatible you are, and it's just really amazing before you get married to kind of like nuttle those annoying little things and get it out the way.
And I want to add one more thing to that as well. Like the Symbis course isn't so much about being compatible, but it's about understanding how other people see things in the relationship. So like the perspective I might see a situation in our marriage might be a different way that Georgia sees something. Like let's just talk about arguing, for example.
Yeah.
Right, like Georgia's, when she argues, she likes to sort it out straight away. Whereas in the heat of the moment, whereas for me, I'm like, man, this is getting heated. I need to step back, think logically, and then come back to this thing. And then if we don't understand that, like, and this is the big thing as well, because this is good advice, right? This is really good advice.
This is what we've learned.
Yeah. So for example, she likes to just arc up and get at it straight away. And I'm
just
like,
no, let's confront this right here, right now. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, and I'm like, and for me, like if we don't understand the way we see things, like I know in the arc of the moment that things are heated, emotions are high, and logically you can't see things clearly. So I like to step back, and what used to happen was not that we argued, but I would step back, I would fix it in my head, and I'd leave it, and I wouldn't go back to her.
He wouldn't even talk to me. Like
I wouldn't talk to her about it because I'd like pretty much found the solution in my head, and I was like, oh, I'm done with it now. I'm fine. Like I closed things real quick, but then when we done the Symbis course, we
figured out how to work each other out. Here's a really practical example. Growing up, my dad always took the rubbish out. My dad just always took the rubbish bin out pretty much most of the time. Like on the road, took the rubbish bag out to the bin. Right? So in the like pretty much I'd always seen that, right? So in my head, I'm like, oh yeah, I don't take the rubbish out because that's not a female job. But that's how I was like growing up. I just saw my dad doing it. I mean, my mum probably did it too, but you know. And then so my expectation going into marriage was Brandon has to take the rubbish out whenever it's full. And when he didn't, it really upset me because I was like,
last week.
What? This is a guy's job. And so I had to learn that, wait, he grew up seeing his mum, dad and sister taking the rubbish out. Whenever it's full, you just take it out. So stuff like that, even the smallest things, like it helps so much doing a pre-marriage course. So we'd recommend it. Yeah.
And like, I guess like through that you find grace for each other. And that's the biggest key, because I found with marriage is like almost like if you look at the way you treat your family, it's like, oh, you're so comfortable, almost too comfortable.
Yeah.
You know, and when you look at the friendships outside of that, it's like you're just, you know, you care for them so much and you're gentle, but when it comes to your family, you're like rah, rah, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And with marriage, like the biggest key is, you know, being, you know, quick to listen and slow to speak, whereas most times, you know, in the relationship you're like pretty much quick to speak and slow to listen. You know, you probably don't even listen. So for our marriage, that's been the biggest key, is being literally quick to hear, slow to speak.
I also thought I'd really quickly mention on the dating subject. Now, if you do date someone and they don't end up being the one, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Everything kind of happens for a reason. And if it doesn't work out, it's okay if it doesn't work out. You know, when you're dating someone, you don't have to be committed you know,
Sometimes
you don't know
we get
if
it wrong.
yeah, sometimes we get it wrong because it's just human nature. And one other thing to keep in mind, this is why boundaries are super important dating. You could be dating someone else's husband or wife. So you've got to be,
Ooh.
no, it's true. Hey, it's really
Oh,
true.
the fire is coming out, man.
So you've got to always have those boundaries in place. Unless you're engaged, got the ring on it, you know they're the one. Even then, you
Not
have
even engaged, married.
married, yeah. You have to be so
Married.
careful. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that. Anyway,
Yeah.
let's get into the how it's been being married.
Well-
So we've been married for 8 months, and one of the questions was, what have been some challenges in marriage? And a lot of people say the first year of marriage is the toughest because you're moving in, learning how to live together. And example, both of us lived at home till pretty much we got married. I'm 21, he's 23. We kind of lived at home. So we didn't really know, I guess, what it was like to just move in with this whole new person, you know?
Well, I knew what it. I knew what it was
He kind
like
of did though,
because
actually,
I'd
because he
lived with
travelled.
people.
He's travelled and stayed with
Yeah.
people all over the place.
This was different though, and like, you know, for me, I think from a guy's perspective, not even from a guy's perspective, but from my perspective, it was actually quite challenging in so many different areas. And you know,
Yeah.
like literally, like when you commit yourself to someone, it's like
Everything. When
It's
you're
like-
married,
yeah,
you've got to commit your finances to each other.
yeah,
His business isn't just his, neither is mine. It's ours.
yeah.
Like everything is each other's, you
Yeah,
know?
and I think, you know, the biggest challenge is pretty much extending, you know, that grace to each other and being,
Yeah.
you know, being gentle with each other.
Yeah.
Because like a lot of things I might like, she might not like.
Yeah.
And things like this don't often pop up early in the relationship or even towards the start of marriage. But, you know, for us, things have like slowly popped up, and that's a good time to really have a really good discussion and get on the same page.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, in terms of challenges for marriage, is just pretty much the communication side. Like for me, like I didn't like to voice a lot of things that I might not have liked.
He
but-
kind of always just went along with it.
Yeah, but then I had to challenge myself to become a better communicator because, you know,
Yeah.
guys, they don't like to communicate the way they feel ever. You know, they just like to be these hard, tough guys. And that's
Yeah.
literally what it was like. I had to literally die to myself. Like, that's the picture, die to myself, and really challenge myself to communicate a lot more better, to communicate to Georgia. And once we're on the same page, I found that there was like the peace and the flow.
Yeah. And you get into a rhythm of marriage where you start to understand each other. We are so fresh into marriage. Like, we've got so many years ahead of us to figure each other out more. But and there's so many different aspects to like getting married too. Like you know, you've got to get on the same page with so many things, even so many little things. The grocery list, your budgeting, like how the house is supposed to be set up, having people over. One of the big things with me was growing up, I'd always see my parents put a lot of effort into making the house nice, candles, lit music on, nice food, everything's tidy, for having guests over because you're honouring the people who are coming over. You want to make them feel comfortable coming into your home. With him, he didn't really grow up with that. It was really different.
Yeah, I
So
didn't
when we
really-
had people over, I was like, Brandon, let's clean, let's vacuum, let's tidy the bathrooms, let's put in all this effort. And he's like, just like, for what kind of thing? But
Yeah.
little
And-
things like that, we had to kind of get on the same page. And he was like, wow, yeah, okay, let's make it nice for people.
And like
You
the
know?
biggest thing was it wasn't like that. It just was
Yeah.
like I never really had guests over.
Yeah.
And if they were the boys, you know.
They were
and
the boys.
You don't need to put anything on for
Yeah.
them, but
So-
like, you know,
And
have
that's
a
just,
game ready to go.
and that's just one example of like one thing we had to get through, you know? And even with God, like with our relationship with God, we have to have our own relationship with God, but we've always got to be checking in with each other about God too, you know, because yeah, you've always got to be checking in with God, with each other, if you know what I mean. Hey.
Yeah, I guess so. Like, yeah, I guess, you know, if God calls you to something, that's actually a really good point. Like, if God calls you to something, if you're not on the same page with your partner, then it can get real blurred.
Yeah,
I
it
guess,
can get
like,
really blurred.
For example, like for me, the past past year,
Yeah.
deliverance ministry has been on my heart, and then all of a sudden, some stuff like that's kind of scary pops up, and like Georgia wasn't too aware of that.
Yeah, I wasn't really aware of some things that he was
Mm.
kind of getting into with like God and like one area of ministry. I wasn't really aware of it, and so I found it really hard at first, and that's like we had to really navigate that.
Yeah, and I guess because like in terms of that specific ministry, there's a lot of warfare that happens and a lot of attacks. So that was like a really big topic. So you always got to be on the same page.
You've got to be on the same page with everything, even God, your relationship
Yeah.
with God, even with simple things like for any of you who may be newly married, finances. You've got to be on the same page.
Yeah.
You've got to know your budget. You've got to know the limit. You've got to know. For me, I think of myself as a generous person, and I like to be generous, and that's just how I've kind of been. I like giving things to people, like physical things. Like I'm like, here's this or here's that, or like to shout people lunch. Like that's just that's just a love language I love to give. And with Brandon, when we first met, it was a bit different for him, and so he had to kind of be like, wow, I need to like kind of allow Georgia to be that way.
It wasn't necessarily that either. It was like more like, if we look at the way we both grew up, and this is the whole point of seeing each other's perspective as well. Like I grew up with a family who supported within the family.
Like just the family,
So it
like
was like,
support
yeah.
your family, hey.
So it was like really operating well in the sphere you have. So for me, when we started dating, it was like this was our sphere. That it was just me and her, and like in terms of anything outside of that, I wasn't too interested because I wanted to focus on one of the big things that was sown into me when I was younger. Make sure your family's right before you make anything else right.
Which is a good point. Like you want to make sure each other's okay before you go helping other people.
So for me, it was like my heart was always for Georgia, and it was like, if she needed any camera gear, I'd just be straight onto it.
Yeah, he was
Straight off the bat.
a very generous person. Yeah. He's very generous.
And I think, for marriages, most of the time they pretty much break up because of the financial issue.
Finance is actually statistic that finance is actually the top cause for divorces and stuff. Could be wrong, but no, honestly
it's legit,
it is.
Like honestly, because that's like the root of all evil is money, right?
Yeah,
so like,
because people get selfish.
Wow, the Holy Spirit just dropped that one.
Yeah.
But that's literally the issue.
So that's why, like, from the start, we had to be pretty on point with budgeting and money, and it was tricky, and it still is a little bit. We still kind of, And
I guess it's tricky for us because we're both working for ourselves. But one of the cool things was, in terms of doing the Simbis course, the pre-marriage counselling, that was a massive topic because of how big that issue can be.
Yeah.
And for us, it was like pretty much mapping out a budget. So we both love budgeting. So
we love like numbers, breaking everything down.
Yeah. So for us, like in terms of financial stuff, it's actually quite easy. Like the beginning was really, really hard like one, I was having to pay for a lot more because I own my own house. And then Georgia was coming into it. So we really had to map out the financial stuff to see what we're covering.
Just
how
hold
much
your
we have
mic
to
up
make.
a bit more.
What we have to make and how much we have to make. And like once we set the budget base, everything's been a lot more easier. We know how much to put into what account and blah,
and
blah,
I
blah.
will say, people say, when you're young, just have fun and do whatever you want. But for us, like, we're blessed, but as well, we are both self-employed and have our own businesses. So we've had to learn how to love the process of juggling numbers and all that. Yeah. So we've had to learn that, and we've figured that out now. We had to learn how to, put money aside because we've got a mortgage and, stuff like that. So you work it out. It's push and pull a bit at the start, but you get into a rhythm, you get into a rhythm with finances, and we're at a really good place.
Yeah, 100%. And when I think about that, like we're in a really good place as well. like one of the things that came up was so many times we asked, like, what's marriage like? And one of George's...
heaps of people ask us, what's it like to be newly married?
And one of George's answers is always, it's better than not being married.
It's so much
true.
better than not being married. Like, I'm so glad we bit the bullet and we were like, let's get married in October 2020.
Yeah, and you know, like, one of the biggest things I always hear, and it's such a rip-off as well. It's literally, this is a rip-off. Like, they always go, oh, you know, the honeymoon season's going to end.
Yeah,
like,
people say that. People
literally.
Are like, people have said to us, oh yeah, you're just in that lovely honeymoon phase. Like, you know what? We are going to try our best to love each other so much
but it's
to the
not
end of
even,
time. Like, why do people bring so much doubt?
But
know?
it's not even like trying more harder to, you know, stay in that phase. It's not even that, like, it's more like I got literally a key dropped down like I think it was like a year ago, and the key was thankfulness is the key to staying in that honeymoon phase. Like,
being thankful.
When you open your mind up to amazing memories and you go back in that memory jar and you remind yourself of all the goodness. Like,
and another one is don't get too familiar with the other
that's
person.
What it was, eh?
Don't get too familiar. And that's been something that's always like kind of stuck with me. I never want to get too familiar with Brandon. That's another thing with marriage. You're constantly, I guess, around each other and you've got to keep, you know, having grace and not getting too familiar.
Yeah, 100%. And like, when I think about the way I start my day, like with God, it's always looking back at the memories and going, God, you've done this, you've done that.
Yeah.
And as I begin to look back, my heart begins to open and thankfulness begins to pour in.
Yeah.
And when I think back at our relationship, you know, I look back 2-3 years and I'm like, wow, like,
look how
do you
much
remember that
God
memory?
has done. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden we're back in that honeymoon phase where we're dating.
Another thing I want to touch on is being married young. Now, I've had a lot of people say to me as well, like, oh, you're married so young, like you're 21. Especially more of the people kind of in his world have been like, whoa, you're like 21 years old. Like, why did you get married so quickly? Well, first of all, we're Christians and we've got morals. But like, we knew. If you know, you know, you know?
Yeah. If you know, you know.
Like, why, you know, we can build this life together.
Yeah,
you know?
for sure.
And, you know, I'm just going to be brutal here. People in the world who date without getting married, let's say you date for 5-6 years, your partner could up and leave you at any time because you're not in a proper committed marriage. Do you know how scary and sad that is? I'm not trying to bring fear into anyone, but I'm just saying you are not really, really committed till you're married. It's true. You're not really committed till you're married because it's by law. And I just want to encourage any of you, if you're sitting on the fence about being married, really think about what's holding you back. Because marriage is the highest form of commitment. It is the highest form of commitment you can give to another person. So I want to encourage any of you out there who want to get married, if you know, you know. And trust that God has got your back and He'll bless your decision.
Yeah.
And I want to, you share, and then I've got something else I want to touch on because we're running out of time.
Yeah, okay. Well, like, one of my most amazing encounters with God was literally on our second wedding. Like, I remember Georgia walking down the aisle. I was a mess.
He was such a mess. He was crying.
I was crying, but you know why I was crying? Because one, you looked beautiful, and two, God literally was whispering in my ear, and He was like saying, I'm so happy with your relationship. And I felt like, I didn't even know how you can feel a smile, but I felt the smile of God, like He was just smiling at our relationship.
Yeah.
And for me, that's the biggest thing, like, you know, God loves marriages. He loves that covenant, you know.
He does, yeah. And so I just want to encourage any of you guys, if you want to get married, and you know it's the right thing, just do it.
Let's go.
Let's go. And yeah, so there's a lot we could talk about, but we're running out of time. Another question was, are you planning on having kids? Yes, we are. Probably not anytime soon, I don't think. I don't know, but
I'm still telling Georgia to count the stars.
Yeah, Brandon's like, count the stars out, how many kids you have. I'm like, whoa. Nah, but
there's 50. Nah.
We are, but not anytime soon. We're both really just focused on like working really hard right now. we should do a part 2. I feel like we should like really go in depth with some like God stuff and I just want to finish on one note. I just want us to share one piece of advice we have. Just it could be about anything.
One piece.
We could honestly go on and on about our relationship and all these little things, but let's just finish on my piece of advice would be if you're someone out there, number one, who is single and you're waiting for the one and you're just praying and you're like, God, I feel ready to date and meet the one and get married. Enjoy your time being single. As annoying as that sounds, one regret I have is not actually enjoying my time for me. I'm young, but I'm just saying, like, enjoy your time being single because it all will happen, you know, so in the snap of a fingers, like nearly 3 years has gone by so far. So enjoy the season you're in and know that God will probably bring them out of the blue. Me and Brandon happened so out of the blue. So, yeah, just know that God has got you right where you want to be and that person is out there.
Yeah, I think my one piece of advice, which is heavy, but, you know, I think falling in love with God before you fall in love with a partner.
Yeah, 100%.
That's heavy, but, like, it's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to love someone to the fullest if you don't love yourself and God, you know?
That's good.
And, yeah, I don't know. Like, what else should we talk about? I think that's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
Wrap it up.
And yeah, if you have any more further questions, we can do a part 2. That's a bit more in depth if anyone else has any more questions. But other than that, thanks for joining me.
Absolutely enjoyed it. I love what she does.
Aw.
You're so inspiring and you're
thank
so
you.
encouraging.
Thank
and,
you.
know, so many people are blessed from this podcast and you taking
Aw,
time out of your own day and out of your own week to do this. So.
thanks. Oh, anyway, thanks for joining and thanks so much for watching. And if you want to see more, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And yeah, I'll see you on the next podcast episode.
Bye.
Yay. Bye.